My name is Devin Graham. Thank you all for joining us today. And I'm the founder of Creative Resurge and working with local artists, Kansas City artists, and throughout the metro who are up and coming or established and so forth. And we are here today with our November featured artist, Bryan Voell. Bryan, would you like to take a second to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. My name is Bryan Voell. We'll start there. And I am primarily, I'm a librarian, and I've been a librarian, worked in the library field for more than 20 years. And I'm currently working at Johnson County Library. I'm the local arts librarian there. I've worked for that library for 12, almost 13 years. And I'm also an artist, and I've been an artist for a long time, doing different kinds of art. I started out doing collages, paper and glue collages, and I did a lot of those. And in just the last 6 or 7 years, I started doing illustrations and drawing and developing those skills. And I'm an untrained artist, self-taught artist. I'm also a husband and a father. I've got an 8-year-old daughter who's going to be 8 years old, and trying to do, sometimes I do everything at once. It seems like, and yeah.
Thinking about your work, which we've really enjoyed having your work on Creative Resurge, and it always intrigues me. I find that I look at it and just want to know the story behind it or what the thinking was behind it. So because you've really got an incredible body of work that really captivates multiple subject matter, multiple layers of different things. Thinking about those things, what inspires you to make your work?
The inspiration comes from a need to express myself, and that has been the case for a long time, for most of my life, in various artistic practices. And the artwork, thank you for the kind words. The artwork that I'm working on now, and that I have been working on for the past 7 or 8 years, is what I like. It has developed. When I started to draw, I didn't really think I could draw. I had to just start from scratch, because I have had no art classes. I had 1 day of art class when I was an undergrad, and I couldn't stand it. I had 1 day, and I mean, that was going on 30 years ago. And so recently, being a part of, I'm going to go off on tangents that are somewhat related to your question, Devin. And
tangents are great.
We're gonna circle back, but I want to talk about a memory that I had recently, that I talked to my wife Erica, who's also a librarian, and it happened when I was in 3rd or 4th grade, and in art class, and we were making. We had these glass bottles, and the project in our class was to wrap yarn around the glass bottle with like, we would use glue, and we all had our glass bottles, and our job was to wrap yarn around these glass bottles. It was different colored yarn, and the end product was supposed to be like, I don't know, a pencil holder or whatever. And we were working on this project, and the art teacher came around and she grabbed mine. I wasn't finished with it. And she held it up to the class and she said, "This is not the way you're supposed to do it. You see, there are these gaps in between the yarn, glue
And
coming out, and uh, this is an example of how you're not supposed to do this."
oh my
And that
gosh.
stuck with me.
What?
And she put it down, and I sat there and I was humiliated. And I, and it struck me that every all the other kids were doing the exact same thing. And I was working on it. I thought I was doing a good job. But that was a life lesson for me that, and this happened in a class that was technically an art class. And somebody came along and said, "No, this is not the right way to do it." Something clicked in me, I think, in that at that very young age, that if I'm going to do something that is supposed to be fun and creative on my own, I want to uh, enjoy it for myself primarily. And making mistakes, I have had from that day on, I think, to send back very little patience, very little time for somebody to come and say, "That is not the way you're supposed to do it." That little voice has stuck with me. Like, I don't care. I'm going to do it. I'm going to if I'm happy with it, I'm happy with it, and that's all that matters.
Oh,
And so, um, if
that's
we're
so
talking about
crazy.
if we're talking about what inspires like the creative drive, and I'm someone who's always interested in what drives people to be creative and to try to challenge themselves and to do things that um, inspires them primarily to keep going and to keep creating. And that's a question that has always followed me. And I think that is for not just for artists or creatives, because I think primarily all kids have a natural inclination to to create and have fun with it. And I think so many people who don't consider themselves to be creative are creative in their own way. Um, and that that energy is really what pushes me forward. Um, so I I was a collage artist um, for many years, and that was basically because I was working at a library at the time, and I had access to all these old books and magazines, and it was cheap, and I could make cards, and I could do all this stuff, and that it was just using the materials that were at right in front of me, basically, and I didn't have to go and spend a lot of money, and that's how I started uh, with collages. And I over the years, I just made so much of them. It became my main um, creative outlet. And I did that for many years, and I got burned out because I wasn't happy like with what I was doing anymore. I didn't feel like I was doing anything new. I was just spinning my wheels. And then my daughter was born in 2013, and when my daughter was born, I had a reckoning with like who I was as a person, and having to uh, it was all of these new responsibilities, big life stuff, and I couldn't keep all of these old books and paper into this work desk that I had with X-Acto knives and glue, and it was a big mess. And I knew that I was going to have a baby and a toddler in the house, and now's the time to make a clean break from this stuff. And I had to leave the collage making behind. And I did. I mean, I had a whole bookshelf of these just old books, and I got rid of them. A lot of them were torn up anyways, and they were very well loved over the years. And I felt like, okay, I gotta make a clean start and focus on being a dad. And I also had a job. Um, but not too long, a couple of years after my daughter was born, I thought, well, um, what what should I do? What should I do? And honestly, the idea of drawing all over the all through these years, I thought I'm not an artist because I can't draw. I've never taken an art class. I've never had any formal training. And there was this voice, this incredible self-doubt of I can't do it because I don't know how, and I'm gonna fail at it. And it was that insidious kind of self-doubt where it was, um, all I heard was, uh, the only reason why you did collages is because you can't draw. And so this idea of I need to do this, I need to work on this, and with trial and error. And so I started out with what I had in front of me, just like when I started with making collages, um, with an iPad and with the stylus, and just starting somewhere. And that was like the beginning. Like that was the first time that I actually started drawing. And I just kept doing it. And a lot of those initial pieces, initial 3 or 4 years of drawings, where I was just seeing what I could do. A very, very rough, very um, primitive, but I kept going and I kept pushing myself. And um, I thought, just in my own mind, I kept improving, at least improving enough where I was interested in becoming better and forming an image of what my style, at the same time, expressing myself and getting some satisfaction out of finishing a piece and feeling like, wow, this is done and I did it. And I feel like I worked hard on it, and I can post it. And social media is another part of this. Uh, this process too, because social media for artists, I think, it's social media in general is complicated. I think for artists, it's becoming more and more um, necessary. But for me, it was like being able to share what I did with people that I sort of know, and say, here, look at this, and then do another one. And it was an outlet, and it was a way for me to keep going, and to push myself. So having that outlet, and getting that initial feedback spurred me along. And thankfully I did have that motivation, um, because if I didn't have that, if it was just me and my immediate, like, family members, you know, that can be an echo chamber. And I felt like, and I know a lot of artists, most artists feel like they need to share what they're doing with the world in some way, wanting to do something that I'm satisfied with, um, and hopefully other people can enjoy it as well. So
Well, I'll say the thing that I really enjoyed about what you just shared with us, because it always seems like such a simple question, like, where do you get your inspiration? And most people are just like, oh, ABC, whatever it is. But the thing that I found interesting listening to what you just shared with us is it sounds like so much more of like this is your why. And I go to that because you people always hear about the elevator speech. And whether you're an artist or an arts organization or really anyone else who's in um, a networking capacity, there's always the question of your elevator speech. What do you do? You know, this is my name, this is what I do, like all those things. But your why is the important part because that's really what speaks to putting yourself out there. Because I agree that I do think artists, there's a need to share. And I think that ties into the story or message or whatever it is that they're trying to say, whether they're aware of it or not. Because I think some artists may not think that they're even sharing something and they may be. um I still can't get over your teacher saying that. I'm really can't get over your teacher highlighting what not to do. I mean, I really um it's like that's like it was like nails on a chalkboard to hear. So I'm sorry for that. Like
Yeah.
as an art educator, I'm just like, what? But at the same time, it's also evolved a lot. You know, education's this giant experiment that we really only know so much about, and we're just continuing to learn about. That it's evolved a lot, but it's also wild to think though that you heard that at one point. And I look at your work and I think, how in the world did somebody say that to you? Because that's not even what it's about. Art is so self-expression.
Yeah, you would hope. You would hope. And especially with kids. And I and you have to think about how often does that happen?
Hmm.
And even today, how often do kids get those messages that this is not, you're not following the assignment exactly. I mean, there's math
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's social studies, and then there's, wrapping yarn around a bottle and all of the equivalents of that. And
Hmm.
it's funny how that has stayed stayed with me. And one thing that I didn't mention is at that time, third or fourth grade, that was the time that I started to take piano lessons. And I started out as a musician and uh, uh, I was classically trained as a pianist. And the thing just around that time, like fourth grade, end of third grade, into fourth grade is when I started to take piano lessons. And very quickly learned that I didn't have the patience necessary to practice what I was supposed to practice. And
Hmm.
I was a composer. Um, I wrote a lot of music when I was a kid and all through high school. That was my first initial creative outlet. And what doomed me as a musician was that I didn't want to practice what my teachers wanted me to practice. I was not a good student, but I loved writing my own music.
it's funny you say that because I have found that creatives, people who are true creatives in their soul, in their essence, that there's a correlation between their role as a student as far as like the expectations, and that they tend to want to go outside of those expectations because it's in your nature to want to explore other things that may be outside of what you're being told to do. And it's not to speak to grades or testing or anything like that, but truly thinking about that these are the methods that you need to learn in order to do this art form, whether it's visual arts, performing arts, whatever it is. That I think people who are true creatives don't always follow those things. That's a good thing. That can be a really good thing in many ways.
I found my way. So I want to talk about libraries in relation to this because there's a connection with this idea of like self-education. Now, I went to public school and graduated from a public school, and in that sense, I have a normal public school education
Right.
background. Um, but when it came to things like music and art and writing, those kinds of things, when I was younger, it was like reading on my own and having access to a library when I was a kid and teenager, and having parents who didn't really care what I was reading, and that I felt like I had free reign over my interests in when it came to um, exploring whatever interested me, and reading and being able to read about it and being able to check out uh, videos, and being able to, like, I having a place to go to um, focus on art or writing away from the house. And the library was that place for me. When I was a kid, that made a big impression. Like, this is a really good place for artists. and and so fast forward a number of years when I started to work at libraries, the two my two those two tracks in life were kind of parallel. Like, um, recognizing that libraries as they exist are so important, um, especially in the lives of artists. And right now, I am the local arts librarian at Johnson County Library, and this is where, like, my life as an artist and my life as a librarian intersect. And I didn't plan it this way. It just happened. Um, and what I recognize as one of my roles is to connect with artists in the community, as a librarian. And a lot of people don't make that connection. But creative work, libraries wouldn't exist. There'd be no collection. Artists use the library all the time for research, for um, self-improvement, for self-education, and for places to just work. And we don't always see the fruits of that. We don't see that work, but it goes on.
To kind of circle back, because thinking about your work, it's just, I find it so intriguing. Okay, and I can't help but point out that, like, it's probably shown up in some of our digital stuff, but one of, like, hands down, I think my favorite piece is actually the Get Your Psychic Spinach Here. It's a really I love that piece. I don't know what it is about that one that I just find I keep gravitating to it. It's a combination of just the colors, and then, just the concept. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
something about it pulls me in. And so thinking about, like, that piece, and you're welcome to talk about that one specifically if you want to, but
Yep.
really what I'm kind of getting at is just where do these ideas come from? Because they feel so, to a blind eye, or to someone who may not necessarily know your work, it's like, what in the world? What is that? What is going on here? And so I'd love to hear more about what you're thinking behind all of it.
Oh, so I'm so glad that you mentioned that one specifically.
I love that one.
Um, okay, so I'll tell you how that one started. And I think this happens more often than I want to admit. Well, there's nothing to, like, be ashamed of, but
Yeah.
it's misheard song. It was a misheard song lyric. Get your
So much
psychic
better.
get your psychic spinach here. Um, it was a line in. So I'm a big fan of this guy Robert Pollard, um, who's the main singer songwriter in the band Guided by Voices, and he's done a ton of work. He's like one of the most prolific artists, musicians ever. And he's not only has that band, he's got other bands and solo stuff. And he's also a great imaginative lyricist. He used to be a fourth grade teacher, and his lyrics are incredible. Um, and so there is one line in one song that all these years I thought it was "Get your psychic spinach here,"
Yeah.
and I was never able to track down the real lyrics to the song. until maybe a year ago or so. And it wasn't the line to the song wasn't "Get your psychic spinach here." And you're going to ask me what the real line was, and I can't.
I was gonna ask you, what was it?
I will look for it. I will look for it. But
You know what though? I think "Get Your Psychic Spinach On" is that's already so much better. No disrespect to him, but that's already a better line than whatever it may have been.
so I thought, wow, that is too good of a line to waste.
Yes.
And
Yes.
yeah, the other thing I want to talk about that ties into this question is I also for many years wrote poetry. And I kept notebook after notebook after notebook ever since I was, in undergrad, or even in high school. I kept notebooks of poems, and so you accumulate all these lines that you think, oh, this might make a good title, this might make a good first line, and this particular line, "Get your psychic spinach here," was something that I thought, oh, this would make a great illustration.
Yeah.
It would make a great title for an illustration. So I thought, I gotta use it. And basically that's how that one started, with that line, and wanting to do something that was an illustration of that line of that line.
I That makes me so
And
much
that,
better
yeah,
just knowing that. Because thinking about that, like I love that so much because it's when you are um an artist, no matter the capacity, I think that that's a way that you live. I think it's like there's always going to be things that are stirring thoughts and ideas, and to be able to take those things and turn around and apply them to something the way that you have, I think is just really admirable. So is that how a lot of your works have like come about? Is it, that a line or something has come up, or do they all have, and you don't have to go into each one, but just do they all have like different stories of how they came to be?
it is a variety of ways that those illustrations come into being. Sometimes it does start with a line. Sometimes it starts with an idea. I think that is more of the exception when I have an idea that I start with. Like, I'm going to draw this, and I'll visualize it, and I'll start to draw that. Sometimes that happens. What happens more often, though, is to start without having any idea of how it's going to end up, and it will come about from a desire to, like, draw a face first. And I love drawing faces, and I love, like, figures and narratives, like the possibility of narrative storytelling with one image. I love that in other art. Like, that is something that catches my imagination the most, when I see others doing it, like trying to tell a story through one painting. How do you do that? That is fascinating to me. I don't want it to be too surreal. Like, I'm not a big fan of surrealism.
Mhm.
I'm not. I like things that are more grounded, yet have just enough weirdness
Yeah.
to make it to make it interesting.
Totally.
Um, and so that's what interests me. So I gravitate towards doing that in my own art. Um, and so a lot of times I want to draw a person. I'm going to start by making a face, and then it'll extend to, well, then the body. And then what's the body doing? It'll do something, and then what will that lead to? And so it is piece by piece. And sometimes I won't know really what's going on in a particular illustration until midway through. And so it's a variety of ways that these things come about, and it's like it is not a clean process. Sometimes I'll start with something and it'll be one way and it's just not working out, but I'll take an element from it and start something new and work from there. Some of the illustrations that I share, I've been working on for
I
years. It's
appreciate
like,
you mentioning that, by the way, because as um, an arts advocate, arts, I don't even know what I do, but all like being I'm an artist myself in mixed media, but I that is definitely like on the sidebar compared to just kind of the arts work that I do to support artists. And one of the things that I hear all the time, especially from newer artists or people who may not be as exposed to the arts community, is that like there's this kind of personal like self pressure to finish something and finish it quickly and do this and that. And it's as an art historian, it's like, but you know that some of the greatest works of art took years, if not a lifetime. So I really appreciate you pointing that out because especially with it being digital in the digital age, I think that that pressure to finish things quickly is exacerbated because of that. And so it's nice to hear from someone who has worked in the digital realm that you still take that long, like that you still take time returning to a piece.
yeah, yeah, and I don't like digital art.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know because I know. In fact, I want to ask you about that because I know you mentioned that. And so, like, it's hard to even decide, like, because it's not that I ever want to like classify anyone, but when I'm talking about like this artist and people are like, oh, well, what type of artist are they? You have mentioned to me that you do not necessarily identify as like a digital artist. So what, like, tell us about that.
Well, I sort of do identify as a digital artist because that is the medium right
Mhm.
now. And I think that looking into the future, um, that the next challenge for me is to paint these. That
Oh, yeah.
may come. That's a whole, like, that's down the line.
You've got this.
This is getting ideas down. This is a way for
Yeah.
me to start somewhere and to get confidence in myself that I can create something that I'm happy with, that I really want to share. Um, and digital art, uh, from what it like the worst digital art in my own opinion is something that is really refined and uh, glossy and um, flawless. That is the genre, and I respect the technical expertise and the technical ability that goes into that, and I don't want to do that. I
Mhm.
Because it doesn't appeal to me. Um, so I feel like when I say I'm a digital artist, that comes with a lot of caveats. And I, to me, that's just using the tool that I have in front of me right now. And that's been the way that I've approached art all my life, is using what I have just in front of me and
I'm
and
having
doing something with it.
such an epiphany about that because thinking about your yarn, okay, that you shared with us at the beginning, it's like the traditional digital art in these days would be the perfect, it's lined up, it's exactly what it
Yeah,
needs to be. And here, this has always been a part of you that you want to do it your way. And I really think that, that's true artistry. That is an artist in its essence. And it's like full circle that it just like listening to you gave me chills because that's what that is essentially.
I love art that shows the hand, the human input
Hmm.
of it, and that's something that I really love about like speaking of Robert Pollard in Guided by Voices. He puts a lot of like rough, unpolished, unfinished songs on albums that are snippets, and there are the more finished songs, and it's everything in between that shows his creative process, and and that is really appealing to me. Um, and it's not all great stuff. And the artists that I love, other artists, it's not everything is is great. I always love when I can see what some of the process has been for that artist, um, and to show and to get something that is meaningful and original while not really showing or highlighting the technique behind it. And I struggle with this as an artist because I don't want my art to be shoddy and or sloppy. That's that's not my intent. And so I struggle with how refined do I like how much revision, how much do I go back and try to fix things as I grow as an artist? I look back at some of my other earlier drawings and think I need to rework that. It's a good idea, and I thought I was done with it, but I'm not done with it. I need to take it back out and rework it. And I do that constantly, and I do new pieces. I start from scratch, and then I go back and work on old pieces, and it's all one big thing. And that's part of my process too. I'm not always working. I seem to go through spurts. And then I'll have periods where I won't be doing anything, and it's just kind of not happening. Um, but that's not unusual. Um, Once I get started on an idea, so here's something interesting. I have to really plan if I'm going to sit down and I feel like I want to start something new. The best time for me to work to get things done is early in the mornings on the weekends. So if I'm starting something, I will wake up at 5:30 in the morning and like bound out of bed and it's like I've got maybe 2 hours that I can work on this, and because that might be my only time during the whole week. I have to plan out my creative time. I have to be very mindful of it because once I get started on a new drawing or an illustration and it gets like I'm really getting into it, I think, oh my, this is really good. That's all I want to do, and I can't just do that. I've
Mhm.
got other things that need to be done.
Yeah.
and and so like I'll start something in the morning and I'll get going on it. It'll be really good, and then I'll do other things throughout the day. And I'll keep thinking about it, and then at every available, if I've got an hour, I've got something on the stove that I'm waiting for to cook. I will work on it, and that becomes part of that that cluster of time when I'm trying to get something done and do everything else. And so I have to be mindful of when I'm working on these things because I get really into it, and I feel like right now I can't afford to be in that zone all the time.
Yeah.
So the time that I have to spend on it are precious hours to me. And I try to make as best use of that as I can. And so I hear from other people that they think I'm very prolific and I do a lot of work. And that's interesting to me because I don't feel like that. Um, I've been working for a very long time, and I have, I feel like a lot of work to show, but that's only because I've been consistent over 25 years, that I've been uh, working on this stuff. Um, but that's just like, that's the life right now. And
Yeah.
I just have to uh, use the time that I have when I have it. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes it's like I I'll force myself to try to be creative, and if I'm zapped, if I'm spent, I don't have the energy. Like it it requires real energy, and it's work in that sense.
Thinking about,
Um,
that there's been a few moments throughout your life, throughout your um, artistry and things like that, that it's, that there's, I've heard a lot of phrases coming from you that are indicating like, you know, I'm not an artist, or I'm not this, or I'm not that. And it's interesting because um, I have known a lot of artists go through that, that it's almost like an imposter syndrome type
um, and that then that cycle starts of self-doubt, um, and that's so common with other artists, like even artists that I think are just naturally creative and coming up with good ideas all the time. That's true with them too. So it's so common. So in that sense, being a creative person, that is part of the that's just part of the makeup. But
Mhm.
no, feeling like you can push through those times of self-doubt, um, and to know that you've done it before and you'll do it again. That is what I keep going back to. Maybe I'll mishear another song lyric, and that will spur me to do something, because that those are unplanned moments, and things come out of the blue that I couldn't anticipate. I'll think, oh, that's such a, I'll hear a line in a podcast interview, and
I think
I'll
that's
think,
excellent. I appreciate your acknowledgement of all that, because I think that I think even like established artists, and I say that with like air quotes, because what does that really even mean anyway? But as far as the industry goes, I think even artists who have found themselves financially sustainable through their art, for example, have moments of that.
my aside from continuing to make new art, I want to uh, have exhibitions. I want to have shows and present my work to the public in that way. And I have done that before with collages. I've shown collages, but it's been a number of years since I've done that. And I really haven't done that with my illustrations. I haven't. And so I'm eager to do that. I feel like now I have enough work that I'm happy with, that I want to get good prints of and frame and show my work in some capacity. I don't know what that's going to be, um, but that is what I think is next on the horizon. And then thinking longer term, that's the next big challenge for me, um, is to paint, and to take what I have learned so far, to um, to canvas, or whatever the medium is, um, whatever the surface is, uh, and to see what I can do, and start over, and learn new skills, and go through what I've gone through for all these different things that I've done. Um, I feel like that is the next step, and I don't know when that's going to happen. I really am right now thinking of I just getting ideas out, and seeing what I could do with ideas on the screen, and getting illustrations, um, and getting new illustrations done, finishing all these old illustrations that I want to finish. And so I'm getting a lot of pleasure out of doing that. And so taking the next step to painting is on the horizon, but that will come at the right time. So yeah,
It'll call
yeah,
you when it calls you, and that's one of the things I
yeah.
really admire about you so much, just as a human being and as an artist, is that you're always pushing yourself, like you're willing to just explore and try out and see what happens. And I think that we could all use a little bit of that in our lives, honestly. So I really I appreciate you taking the time to share with us your digital work, because um it's because it hasn't been seen in a traditional sense. I appreciate you taking the time to share with us your collages, because and your hand cut collages, because that I think aids the story of you and your artistry and the thinking behind all of it, that it goes hand in hand. And I hope that someday, if you decide to explore the painting, that perhaps we'll be in touch at that point, as well. But I want to thank you for taking the time to uh, let us get to know you a bit, through Creative Resurge and throughout this month. We're going to spend the next couple weeks continuing to share your work and share the incredible poetry that you've decided to, um, that you've been exploring alongside that, which I also commend on a totally different
I wanted
level.
to thank
Um,
you for offering the opportunity because these are the first poems that I've been working on in a number of years. And so it has spurred me to write again in a way that I haven't in a while. So yeah,
I
thank you for
yeah,
pushing me to do that.
I think it's great, and it adds such another dimension to everything that you're doing. And I think I just feel very lucky to have had the opportunity to look at your work so in depth, because when I'm looking at these images and um, really taking them in, I keep finding more details that I may not have seen the first time, and then the poetry just adds that much more to it. So so thank you.